So, I just got to see Luca Guadagnino's brand new film, Challengers. This is, of course, the same filmmaker that made movies like Call Me By Your Name and The Incredible Bones and All from a couple years ago. He's a very, very unique filmmaker whose movies really like to study, relationships and love between different characters and how that kind of gets in the way of different aspects of life. Sometimes it's cannibalism. In this movie, it's tennis. This movie's been getting a lot of hype ever since that first trailer came out that was just kind of, extremely over the top and showed Zendaya as the centerpiece of this movie, kind of being in this love triangle with these two dudes. And everything in every review had this movie seeming like it was just going to be 2 hours of Zendaya sleeping with these dudes, and that was the entire movie. And that's why I wasn't, that excited for it, because I was like, if that's the movie, I don't really need to see that. But, in fact, this movie ends up being really not that at all. Despite what all the reviews are saying, this movie is not about sex. I just don't understand why that's, the central point of this movie. Oh, it's a movie about sex. Characters... I don't even think there's one, full-on sex scene in this movie. So what is this movie actually about? Well, this movie is about love and relationships through these three characters who are all tennis players. There is sort of a love triangle going on here, but it's not as simple as that. There's a lot of complicated stuff in this movie with these characters, with what they love, who they love, and how it relates to the game of tennis and what they do in their everyday lives. The way this is done in this movie is by jumping around time. So this movie starts off in present day. We have this competition between the two main guys. Two characters are Art and Patrick, played by Mike Faist and Josh O'Connor, both of which are great in this movie. I'll get into that in a second, but we start off with this tennis match between these two older versions of them as Zendaya watches on. It's one of the best shots of the movie. It's one of the first shots as we watch this tennis match, and the camera kind of cruises across the tennis court and it finds Zendaya in the middle of the crowd. Brilliant stuff there. But then from that point on, the movie jumps back and forth. It jumps to the past, to the present, to the past again, to the present, and it keeps on bouncing back. It's a structure we've seen in a billion movies before. If you've ever seen the movie with Kevin Costner where he plays the pitcher and he's pitching a perfect game and it's jumping to his past, it's very similar to that. So we get to know why these characters are in the situation that they are, the stakes of the situation, who's with who, and what's going on. And through it we get to learn these characters, and all of these characters are really, really interesting in their own right. We have the two guys who are these best friends who have been rooming together since they're 12 years old. They're these rich kids who went to boarding school, and they're great at tennis, right? They are phenomenal tennis players, but they don't really care about tennis. They care more about getting laid, and that's when they meet Zendaya's character, and they are both kind of obsessed with her and, sort of in love with her. It's legitimately love at first sight, or maybe lust at first sight. But either way, they come together, you get that great scene from the preview, and then Zendaya kind of makes a deal with them that whoever is the better tennis player, essentially, I will go with. And from that point on, we just get a spiraling movie where we get this intrigue of how tennis relates to these characters. And Zendaya's character in this movie is really kind of the anchor. She's the whole point of everything that happens in this film. She is the chaos, but also sort of the order in a way. She's this very unique character who is this superstar tennis player at a young age. She is this phenom who has this great future ahead of her, and that future is kind of stripped from her in a way. So she gets involved with these two dudes, and it's a question of who does she love, and what does she love, and the way that kind of becomes, and I don't want to spoil anything, but part of the central theme of what Zendaya actually loves, her character, the things and the people that she loves, is really what makes this movie extremely strong in its themes, because it becomes more than just a love triangle story. It becomes a more complex study of obsession and kind of love, not just for people, but for certain aspects of life. And we sort of watch her as she's scheming throughout the movie, and we don't really know throughout the whole time exactly what she wants, but the moment that it clicks, that you understand what her motivations are, you understand what she's trying to get at, the film and the script here just ends up feeling a lot smarter. It feels a lot more dense and a lot more packed with just really great stuff. And the other characters in this movie help to sell it. These two dudes and how they feel about Zendaya, how they feel about each other, what they want, what they love. I feel like these three characters, it would be very easy to just make a love triangle movie with tennis, but instead each one of these characters kind of approaches love and obsession in a different way. They want different things, but because of these things, although they are different things that they all want, they all conflict with each other, which causes conflict and competition and just so much great stuff. And this movie is carried by great performances. I mean, the script here is really, really good, but the performances are unbelievable. Zendaya, this is arguably the best performance of her career. She is tough. She is terrifying. This is a powerful, powerful role for Zendaya, and she sells it to the best of her ability, even if I think at times the character is a little too ridiculous. There's times where I'm like, there is not a single human being on planet Earth that would act or live the way that this character is living, but that's not Zendaya's fault. She does it to the best of her ability. Mike Faist as Art is really, really good in this movie. He kind of brings this innocence, but also also this this almost puppy dog vibe to him, but still this tough kind of Sigma male. You know, he does it very well. Of course, the tennis parts, he sells the physical aspect extremely good. Josh O'Connor, I think, is the star of this movie. He's so good in every second of the film that he's in. He's kind of this wild card type personality. He doesn't want to be controlled. He doesn't want to be second fiddle to anybody. He just kind of wants to be free and happy and express himself. And he's like, fuck you if you think I'm going to be a follower. We're peers, you know. He's just really great. And the dynamic and chemistry these characters all have together, these actors all have together, just adds to the film. Now, this film isn't perfect. I do have problems with it. And it's the same problems I have with a lot of Lucasfilms, specifically Bones and All. The first 2 acts of this movie are 5 out of 5. They are absolutely perfect. I was in it from the start. The movie had me hooked. It was moving fast. So much great stuff was happening and balanced. The time jumps extremely well, and it was delivering its story in such a nuanced way that felt so earned and so beautiful. But once it got to the 3rd act, and I had the same problem with Bones and All, the film just... It didn't know when to end. And that's not always a complaint. Sometimes you want movies to go on forever. But this movie, like Bones and All, there's a moment when we were in the 3rd act. The 3rd act had started and we're going through where it's like, man, if he could wrap this up in the next 30 seconds, we will be golden. But then the movie just goes on for like another 20 minutes, and the 3rd act just drags and drags and drags, and by the time you get to the final moments, as well as it's written, as well as it wraps the whole thing up, and as well as it makes sense with the movie's themes, it just felt like, at least for me, that you could have done it quicker and better, and it would have made the movie perfect in a way. But because that 3rd act drags on for so long, with so many slow-mo shots, oh my god, the slow motion in this 3rd act, I thought Zack Snyder directed this movie for a second. It's unbelievable, and some of the shots are cool. There's a lot of creative stuff with the tennis to make it more interesting for the viewer, but god, there are just some egregious slow-motion shots that add so much time to this runtime. But this whole 3rd act, it was just like kind of waiting for something to happen. It was like if you were watching like American Idol or something, and as they're announcing the winner, they're just like, drum roll please. Wow. And the winner is... One second. Mouth is dry. And the winner is... After this commercial break. That's how the entire 3rd act of this movie felt. It just felt like we were waiting to get to the big moment. And by, you know, there's a point in the 3rd act in that final scene where you kind of know where it's going. You kind of see the direction it's going, and it just takes a while to develop there. And Bones and All had the same problem. There was a moment in Bones and All where I'm like, man, if this film wraps up right here, best movie of the year. Absolutely perfect. But then it didn't, and it just kept going and going and going and going and going. And by the time it reached that ending, it felt wasted at that point, and the movie had lost me. This one kind of had the same thing. But the characters here are way too good to, like, just dislike this movie at all. The story in the first 2 acts is absolutely brilliant. The way they weave in tennis into the movie with different filmmaking techniques, like having a POV of the ball and a POV of different people, and just... every single scene with tennis had a different style of how they filmed it. It never felt like we were watching the same thing over and over and over, which is what you get a lot of different sports movies. They'll film the same thing the same way. This one, though, they found creative ways to make each tennis scene, each game, feel unique and feel like its own thing, and there was a lot of creativity with the cinematography. And like I said, the first 2 acts are great. The first act is, like, utterly perfect. This movie is absolutely brilliant. It is a great study of love and obsession, and it is one of Lucas' best movies, if not his best movie, and I could recommend it to all of you. I will give Challengers a 4.5 out of 5. The 3rd act, man, just takes off that half point. Can't give it a 5. You guys see Challengers? If you did, let me know what you thought of it down below. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe for more. Turn on notifications to see everything when I post it. Click the video on your screen right now, and I will see you guys in the next one.